In 1952, a plane crashed into a three-story apartment building in New Jersey. Though it would be 2 years before Judy Mandel's birth, she still felt the impact of that crash ripple on her own life.
The plane crashed into my family's home. This is before my birth. And my 7-year-old sister was killed. My 2-year-old sister at the time was Linda. She was nearly killed. She had third-degree burns over 80% of her body. She was 2 years old. You can imagine, a little tiny baby.
As an author, Mandel's written about the repercussions of that traumatic experience. Even though she was the youngest, Mandel became the supportive figure in her household, even into adulthood.
My sister, her girls, they would look to me to help, to fix things, whether or not I was capable or not of doing that. But I guess I came to believe that I was supposed to do that. I was supposed to do that.
A role that only grew after the death of her sister, who left behind two daughters. Mandel soon discovered one of her nieces, Cheryl, was in prison for possession of drugs. She helped her in any way she could, often sending books and keeping up communications through letters and occasional video chats. Then, one day, Cheryl was released.
I told her she could come stay with me after she got out of prison, but at that point she didn't want to. She said it was important for her recovery to be on her own. Whether or not that was true, I'm not sure. There are a lot of decisions that were made that you question. You question what happened.
After rejecting Mandel's offer, Cheryl ended up homeless on the streets of Louisville, Kentucky in the middle of winter. The exceptional cold that year prompted shelters to fly white flags outside their buildings, signaling that their doors were open to anyone in need, regardless of bed space. That event inspired the title of Mandel's newest memoir, called White Flag, the true story of trying to help her niece survive a drug addiction.
This is not a recovery story because I always get that question, how is Cheryl now? Well, Cheryl passed away, overdosed in early 2017. So, this is, I call it an investigative memoir, which I think it's more investigative than it is memoir, to be honest. Trying to answer the questions that we all have. Why does this happen? And why can't they stop? And why couldn't I help them?
Cheryl had struggled with substance abuse for most of her life, and even though Mandel lived in a different state, she tried to find ways to support her without enabling the addiction by setting up job interviews and buying her bus passes. When her niece said that she was sick and needed money for the local drugstore, Mandel offered to set up a Walgreens card. They soon learned that being in separate states made the process difficult, but Cheryl was quick to find a solution.
This should have been a red flag. She immediately told me that, I have a debit card. If you could put money in that, I'll give you access to it so you can see what I'm doing with it. I'll only use it, at the drugstore. It turned out that almost immediately, the second time she used it, it was for cash. And when I questioned it, she said, no, their machine is down. I had to go to there were all the lies that came with that. And later on, I did find from her text messages, I was able to get her phone later and found out that just wasn't true.
Mike Gimbel, a drug abuse expert, says Cheryl's behavior is typical of an addict.
They're going to lie to you all the time. You cannot believe them. You can't trust them with money, the car. Those are the things that's what we do. We're addicts. We're great manipulators. It's up to the people that are around to try to do something. It's hard, and sometimes you have to call for help. Nothing wrong with that.
Gimbel says the first thing a parent or loved one should do is stay calm and gather the facts. While it can be tedious, it's important to monitor their behavior and keep track of inconsistencies.
You need to build a case like you're going to court. You've been late 3 times, your boss has called, you missed picking up our son at soccer today, a whole list of things. They can't deny their behavior. You attack the behavior, not the person. You love the person, you hate their behavior. And that's important. You also don't want to put them in a guilt trip of, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me? I'm embarrassed. I feel bad. No, they're doing it to themselves.
Once you've gathered enough information, Gimbel says the next step is confrontation.
You've got to reach that point where you say, okay, we've talked about this a little bit. I've asked you to get help. You haven't done it. Now, this is it. And you have to be ready to take some tough positions. If you don't go for help, and we call it a treatment center, and there's a bed open for you or a slot open, if you don't go for help, we're going to have to leave. or you're going to have to leave.
Which is a difficult choice to make, but Gimbel says it needs to happen in order for your loved one to finally seek help. Without drawing a hard line and sticking to it, nothing changes.
The one thing you've probably learned by now is that the user is a great liar, a great manipulator. They promise all the time and they never come through because all they want to do is get you to lay off of them so they can continue. A person will not stop using drugs or any other compulsive behavior, be it gambling, sex addiction, you name it. They don't change their behavior until what they're doing hurts.
Gimbel speaks from experience. He just reached the 50-year mark of his own recovery.
I mean, I was really a hardcore heroin addict back then. And I had people out to kill me. I had people blew my car up in front of my parents' house. I mean, I was at the point where if I didn't leave to go someplace for help, I would have been killed.
He started using in his early teens up until he was 21. Gimbel's addiction spanned nearly 7 years, right under his parents' noses.
They didn't know what I was doing until they caught me shooting up heroin in the bathroom. And that was years too late. They really didn't. I have one of these parents who were unconditional love. Like you can love them more and they'll change. And they would bail me out. I took them broke. They had to sell their house, rent an apartment because they were either bailing me out of jail, paying for the lawyers, or paying for the people that I ripped off, or paying for cars that I wrecked.
Having been on both sides of addiction, Gimbel says parents and loved ones need to be very aware of how a person is acting and not afraid to confront the issue.
Most of the parents I've ever worked with, even when their kids were found that they had overdosed, they knew it, they thought it, they heard it, they felt it, and they didn't know what to do. So there's not a one shoe that fits everything here. But at the same time, not doing anything or enabling and covering up, you can't. It's a lot to worry about. But the one thing you can't do is nothing.
If you're unsure where to start, Gimbel advises going to an Addicts Anonymous meeting. Talking with an expert can give you insights into addiction and resource options. Mandel includes a list of her research and resources in the back of her book for anyone needing some guidance. Mandel's book, White Flag, is available now. You can find more information about Mike Gimbel and Judy Mandel on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. For more behind the scenes, follow Radio Health Journal on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Nancy Benson. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
There really are some outdated ideas about what chronic fatigue syndrome is. So I usually tell people, forget everything you thought about chronic fatigue syndrome before now.
A condition that's surrounded by doubt is finally getting the research attention that's long overdue.
Then chronic heartburn isn't normal. In fact, it can cause more harm than smoking.
Everybody thinks it's like not a big deal to have heartburn, but nobody realizes that it's the number one cause of cancer in America for the esophagus.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal. I'm Reed Pence, the producer and host of Radio Health Journal. If you like listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
I think in general, parties feel, okay, if you've lost, you need to move on and we need to bring fresh blood in to run against the challenger on the other party.
The 2024 presidential election is just around the corner. Then,
there's fewer youth who actually engage with someone who's served in the military, and so they might not see it as an avenue of service.
Understanding why our military is shrinking. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Radio Health Journal and Viewpoints on your favorite radio station. And subscribe and listen anytime on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Radio Health Journal.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.